Okay, I think we're live. Peace, soul family. I love you all. I hope everyone's having a wonderful day today. My name is Jeremiah. You're tuning into Secrets of the Sacred Serpent, where we discuss all things spirituality and the occult. Today, I just wanted to come on here and just kind of have a little story time about my experience with UFOs and aliens, I guess you would say. So, we're going to start with my very first experiences, which this happened during my teenage years. I was raised in Knoxville, Tennessee, in the inner city, a place they used to call Burlington, but it's on the east side of Knoxville. So I lived in the city limits growing up from a child up until I had moved as a teenager to go live with my mom at like 13 maybe. So during living in the city, growing up, when you look at the stars and stuff, there's a lot of light pollution, so you really can't see the stars all that well. And I mean, you can see them, but definitely not all that good. So growing up, the only times I would see the stars in full is when my family would take me up to the mountains, and we'd go up there at nighttime and stargaze and watch meteor showers, all kinds of different things. But when I was in the inner city, you couldn't see the stars that well. So when I went to move in with my mom, first I moved to Pigeon Forge. We lived in this little cabin up kind of on a hill, but we ended up moving out of that place to another place in Sevierville, not far from that. But the house that my stepdad had bought was at the very, very top of a mountain. I mean, it was like the biggest, longest, like almost mile-long driveway that just curved up and around the mountain, and then the house was at the very, very tip top. So when I moved in with them and we moved to that house, I would always sit outside and just stargaze and moon gaze, and I was just so enamored, impressed that I lived up there, so I literally got to see the stars all the time. And I would spend a lot of time outside. I was during my teenage years, I was going through a lot, and connecting with nature honestly was like something that was really big to me. And now that I'm spiritual and I'm super connected to nature and stuff, I see what my spirit was guiding me to do. But I lived up there in the woods on the top of the mountain, so I would go out and just sit under trees and just think about everything that was going on. Now, at that point in time, I wasn't realizing that those trees were conscious beings and they were feeding me energy and healing me, and the nature was there watching me and understanding what I was going through and helping me to heal. But now I connect with trees and I connect with nature. But back then I was connecting, I just didn't even realize it. So I would sit out there and stargaze all the time, and I started seeing weird things. And so after I started seeing these weird balls of light that kept moving around in really weird patterns, and I knew for a fact they weren't stars. Back then, we didn't have cell phones like we do now. So I'm 35 years old. So when I was 15, it was 20 years ago. We had like flip phones and some little phones, but Blackberries and stuff like that, but nothing as nice as we have today. So we actually had to have cameras, and I wish my mom and my stepdad split up, so a bunch of that stuff was lost. But we had cameras, like hardware cameras, that we had recorded a bunch of this stuff in. But at first, my stepdad and my mom didn't believe what I was saying, and so I actually had to prove it to them. So I get them to start coming outside with me and just hanging out, and we would just chill out there in the summertime and just eat and all kinds of different stuff, just pretty much chill out there. And I finally got my mom to see the thing. And no, actually, I believe it was my stepdad I got to see first. My stepdad got to see it, and then he was talking about it, so my mom came outside and looked at it. But anyways, so I'm seeing these light things going through the sky, and I'm not knowing what they are. I'm trying to record them. I remember I was having a hard time getting to record them. Like, it was almost like they knew I was recording. So every time I would go to lift the camera up, sometimes they would just like disappear, and I'm like, what the heck? Or they go down behind some trees or something out of my point of view, my perspective. But shortly after this, I started having these very weird experiences for the first time in my life. Now, I had had a few night terrors throughout my life where I would just have kind of like nightmares and I would wake up or whatever. But this was the first time this had ever happened, and it started happening shortly after I was looking at those things and being like, dude, they're UFOs, da da da. So, what I was experiencing was sleep paralysis, and there was many times that and it was just happening back to back to back, man, and it was freaky. And a lot of times I would realize that I was like sleeping and try to wake myself up, and I would get myself stuck in that sleep paralysis state. So I would be lucid dreaming, and I'd realize I was dreaming. It'd probably be a nightmare or just something that brought my attention that I was dreaming, and then I would try to wake myself up, and I would push myself into my body and push myself into my body, but I just couldn't get myself to move, and then I would be snapped in my body in my room. And a lot of these times when I was having sleep paralysis, not every time but almost every time, I would have these like shadowy entities that were made of like dark light. It was like shadow, but it was light. It was weird. But I would have them standing around me, like just looking at me, and they would just be getting close to me and looking at me, and it just frightened the daylights out of me for sure. But and then a few times they were looking in the windows, so I was having these shadow beings coming in the windows, and while I was trying to wake myself up, I could see out the windows and see them walking by, and then they would be in my room, to be right next to me, and they'd walk by and then walk in front of my closet. So that was the first experiences that I had, was like around 13, 14 years old. And that ended up kind of settling down for many years, and I had a lot of other crazy stuff going on in life. Um, but these past like 7 or 8 years since I've started like changing my life and becoming really spiritual, um, I believe it was 3 years, about 3 years ago, that my coven came together. Sorry, had a little burp. But about 3 years ago, my coven came together, and we started just practicing magic together. And a lot of the times we would go to different EDM shows because almost all of us are flow artists. So we either spin poi, be it fire or LED poi, staffs, people that do gloving, the LED gloving. We have people that do, what else was it? Poi, staff, the whip, um, hula hoops, people that do the LED hula hoops, flow wise. But anyways, we would go do flow sessions at the shows, and it was weird because we started to notice that all these shows were landing on like full moons or when planetary alignments were happening, real big ones. And we were like, we definitely noticed it because we're watching astrology, we're doing our walking our spiritual path, but we start noticing that. And at first we were thinking, oh wow, these shows are being aligned by the owner. He's like tapped in spiritually, and he's making sure to get the shows on the days that all these things happen. But later we came to a deeper understanding that the universe was aligning all these shows on these alignments. And we definitely noticed a difference between the shows where there would be an alignment or something, and then the shows where there really wasn't much happening in the heavens, and those nights would be nothing like the nights that the big planetary alignments and full moons and new moons and stuff were happening. So around that time, we were going over to one of our other coven members' house. Pretty much before and after the shows, we'd go there and just kind of hang out for a little while and cleanse ourselves with Palo Santo and just kind of prepare for the show. Prepare ourselves so that other people's energy wasn't like rubbing off on us or anything. And then we go to the show, get into our flow state. I actually call it getting high on spirit. So literally go to a show completely sober, no drugs, no alcohol, and just have our flow toys. And when you actually start doing flow with skill toys and stuff, you get your mind into a meditative state and into a state of flow. And when you do, it alters your brainwaves. Your brainwaves actually shift from their normal state of beta or whatever into at least an alpha. I think I've seen somewhere saying that theta was even related to states of flow. But you get into these deeper realms of consciousness, and it really is like a mind-altering substance. Your brainwaves, your own natural chemicals. If people would understand the chemical pharmacy that resides within the human body, if you understand why we have all these receptors for THC, for opiates, and for all these different chemicals that we take, it's because our body actually already naturally produces these things. So your body produces cannabinoids. Your body also produces endorphins, which fit into those exact same receptors that these opiates are going into, and THC and stuff like that. But you can get high on your own supply, like Wim Hof says, where you're using breathing techniques like Wim Hof method, pranayama, where you're, or what's the other one? Not Ayurvedic. Can't think of it, but where you're doing breathing methods to release all these chemicals in the brain. And like I said, those flow states are breathing techniques you can use to actually get into altered states of consciousness without having to take an external substance. But yeah, I call that getting high on spirit when you get into your flow. This is a video about UFO stuff. I just had to lead up to that. So we would get into the flow state at the show, then we would leave. Every time that we would leave, we would go back to that coven mate's house. And I'm not going to say their name because I just don't know if they want their business out there. But we would go to that coven mate's house, and they had a really big backyard. And they had already, before we had met, had created a massive circle that they would always go out there and do magic and stuff in. So we started going out there after every show, and then even when there wasn't shows on weekends or any time that we had extra time, we would go down there and practice magic. So when we and actually right before I get to that one, a few years before that, about 5 years ago, I started sun gazing. So when I started sun gazing and moon gazing and stuff like that, stargazing, I started to look in the sky a lot, and that's when I started really understanding chemtrails and all these planets that are coming into our solar system, and from the outer rings, if you view it in the same perspective of a infinite plane or flat earth with something there, but there's something else in the heavens. There's a lot going on in the skies. Orbs of light, plasma events, like there's just a lot going on in the sky. I've seen multiple suns in the sky at the same time, and it's not that it's just something that I am seeing. Over when we all get together, we've all seen multiple suns in the sky at the same time. Other just weird things in the sky. But at nighttime, I just had to lead up with that because when I started looking up sun gazing and stuff like that, that's when I started noticing everything, and it was crazy how much there was. So when we started doing it at nighttime, though, at my coven mate's house, there was 2 or 3 different times where we had major UFO experiences. So one of the times we're sitting there doing rituals, chanting, we got a little fire going, and one of my coven mates says, "Oh my God, look above us." And so all of us, there's like 5 or 6 of us out there, all of us look up, and literally directly above us, like right where our circle is, there's a massive disc-shaped UFO. It's got lights that are starting here in the center and pulsing outward to the outer edge in a big star formation. So there was a bunch of lines, and they weren't very bright lights, but they were like pulsating and getting brighter. So they'd be super dim, almost off, and then they'd get a little bit brighter and run along lines. So all 6 of us are out here, and this is in completely conscious, completely sober states. I mean, the only thing that we're high on is, like I said, spirit, getting into a ritual and getting into an altered state of consciousness. So in a meditative state. So we're seeing this, and all of us are just in amazement. And one of them even actually ran off over to like a tree because it just freaked them out. But that was somebody actually that they ended up leaving our coven because we had so many intense experiences with spirit manifestation, and with that, but yeah, that person was there anyways. But we're watching the UFO and stuff. That person runs off. We start kind of yelling at it, asking it to show us something, and within like a minute, it disappeared. Now, the thing about this is, this UFO wasn't like 300, 400 feet in the air. This thing was like right above the trees. I mean, it was right above our circle, and it was about a little bit bigger than our circle, but it covered up that whole area all above the trees, and it was very obvious. It wasn't like it was something hidden in the clouds or something. It was a freaking ship, and it was just like right there. So there was that time. On another occasion, we were out there doing rituals, and one person saw a Orb UFO, and the Orb UFO is actually over kind of, I believe it's west. Yeah, because the sun would set that direction. So someone saw a Orb UFO kind of moving around, and so all of us were already looking in the sky looking for the Orb UFO. We finally found it, and all of us are looking at it, watching it move around. We're just talking about it like, oh my gosh, dude, this thing is like definitely something different. It's just, I mean, it's not a star, it's not an airplane. Like, it was definitely just like a glowing white orb, and it was moving around back and forth. And so as we're watching that, I can't remember what it was. I was supposed to go. Maybe I had to go in the house to go to the bathroom or something like that. But I turn around to go back up, and I'm still kind of looking in the sky, because I know that if that one's up there, the possibility is we may be able to see more. But this one was weird. So I turn around and I look up in the sky, and this thing was like, it almost looked like, it reminded me of almost like a koi fish, but it glowed. So it was like a bioluminescent looking fish thingy, and it had a tail that it was moving with, but it was alive. This thing wasn't like a metal ship or anything like that. It was like a being, and when you look at it through the view of the flat earth and having a firmament where there's more water above us, it almost looked like those bioluminescent fishes that you see at the very bottom of the ocean. And it was just like swimming through the darkness of the sky. It was crazy. So as soon as I see that, I'm like, everybody has to see this. Like, this is way better than a dot of glowing and, just a single orb in the sky. So I go get them, and they come up there and start to look with me. And the thing is just still there. It's kind of moving in the sky, moves forward a little bit. It turned, did like a 90-degree angle almost. Then it ended up going back above the trees. But the thing is, everybody saw this. Everybody was sober. Everybody was, maybe in a little bit of a meditative type state because we were doing rituals and stuff. But besides that, this is something that completely manifested for all of us. And it was like a biological being. So immediately, that's what I came to in my consciousness, was like, oh, the waters above, I'm surely as above, so below. You got the waters below with the fish, with the bioluminescence and stuff. It makes sense that above you would have an ocean with the bioluminescent things, But that's just what it reminded me of, was a fish, because it was really kind of big at the front, and then it came down almost to like a point, but then it had like a little bulge at the end. But that was definitely that one. And also, about 2.5 years ago, I was working through the Cliffoth, which is like the tree of knowledge of good and evil, or the dark side of the tree of life. And when I started working through those Clifo workings and the different path workings through the tunnel of Set, I was having a lot of astral experiences, and I started having the sleep paralysis again. And the last time I had it a lot whenever I was working through the Cliffoth, and I was definitely seeing those beings. And in my opinion, these UFOs and these aliens and stuff like that, they're not interplanetary beings that live out in space somewhere. They're like interdimensional beings. They're able to move through dimensions, and that's how they actually get around. It's not going from here to some planet out in outer space. They're actually coming through different levels of the multiverse or something. But That's my opinion, that they're definitely interdimensional, and they're highly connected to spirits. So these aliens that are coming through people, and people are channeling them or whatever it is, or the same way that people are channeling spirits and stuff like that, they exist and move through those same astral and etheric planes that spirits do. Aliens and demons, angels, deities, all the above. But that was my experience with UFOs and aliens. I've definitely had a lot of sleep paralysis where they've been around me, and then the other experiences were just spotting them in the sky. Now, since then, me and my girlfriend the past few months have seen a handful of little UFOs, little orbs that kind of move weird back and forth. And the past few years I've seen a bunch just stargazing. But you know, the big ones were the ones that I told you about. Besides that, I see the little orb things like a lot. But I hope that this kind of gave you guys an idea of what you can see in the sky, because this is definitely something you can see if you start paying attention. See, most people, they've got them looking down into their phone and so consumed by their social media and by the world that's going on around them and the news and all this stuff that they never look up and see what's going on in the skies around them. So make sure that you make the intention to look up. I love you guys. I hope everyone's having a wonderful day today. Like the video if you like it, and definitely subscribe if you haven't already, as I'll be having many more videos on the occult and spirituality to come. I hope you guys have a blessed day. Leave a comment in the comment section down below if any of you guys have had any UFO or alien experiences, and if you guys have any questions about any of my experiences, you can also ask those. But I love you guys. I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Peace.